I don't think it's coincidence that the first original alien to come to Earth from the heavens appeared as a talking reptilian creature, giving New Age doctrines such as "you are God and you cannot die." This is the very same message that we hear given by these entities from testimonies of abductees. Occultist Aleister Crowley was a self-professed wickedest man alive, and he drew a sketch of a demon that would often visit him. This demon introduced himself as Lamb, which is Tibetan for the way, an exact counterfeit of the true Lamb of God, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Now we can clearly see that these entities are not visitors from other planets as they claim to be, but are actually demons seducing the world with doctrines of devils.
Something go right over the top of us.
We are getting new video from the Navy showing pyramid-shaped objects.
The last card is the alien card. All of it is a lie.
There are a lot more sightings than have been made public, movements that are hard to replicate, that we don't have the technology for.
We don't have it. They don't have it. The question is, who has it? Who's operating these vehicles?
The information is very compelling. It's real.
Yeah. Okay, it's real. Are they from another planet?
If it's not ours and it's not theirs, well, then it's someone or something else.
I can't wait for this report to come out.
There is no longer any doubt unidentified flying objects are real. This one was seen by now retired Navy pilot Alex Dietrich in her F-18 off the coast of California.
UFO sightings in New York have nearly doubled since the pandemic began, and we are getting new video from the Navy showing pyramid-shaped objects flying in the sky.
These cell phone photos taken by a FA-18 pilot in March of 2019 show 3 different unidentified aircrafts off the coast of Oceania. A Department of Defense spokesperson said, quote, "I can confirm that the reference photos and videos were taken by Navy personnel. The Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force has included these incidents in their ongoing examinations."
A U.S. intelligence report on UFOs is expected to be released very soon. The long-awaited Pentagon report on UFOs has finally been released. Friday, the U.S. government released a much-anticipated report on everything it knows about UFOs.
Now, the study released on Friday found only one of those can be explained, just one.
Peace. What's good? How y'all doing? Today is Saturday, April 1st, 2023. I pray that this message reaches you all in the best of health, spirit, and mind. Welcome to Quantum Conversations special series that's going to be focusing on UFOs. This is part 1. Today, we're going to be looking at 2 very different extremes of the argument, if you will, in terms of UFOs. In one breath, we have, this idea of a reptilian race and the Greys, etc. Sort of a race or entities that are of a demonic or satanic quality, so to speak. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is that there are, righteous, powerful beings that are sort of guiding what's happening in earth affairs, even if it's just in a cosmic sort of way. So we're going to look at the 2 extreme polarities of that. As I mentioned before, Quantum Conversations is going to be a 30-minute video that does a deep dive into metaphysics, spiritual sciences sort of conversations. And because UFOs has been very prominent in the news as of late, and because I know that there's a lot of extremes when it comes to this conversation, either the PSYOP, which is what that first video was about, and I'm going to post that full video. It's called the UFO Deception, talking about how they're going to use UFOs in order to implement this next stage of their agenda. We've also talked about Project Bluebeam, and there are videos that supplement that conversation as well. But I'm going to go into the space weapons, sort of space war aspect of this in upcoming videos. Here's what I want to talk about beyond part one. And I don't know how many videos it's going to take me, but I think that these subjects are particular to the conversation about UFOs. And they'll all be in 30-minute format, 30-minute video formats, all quantum conversations videos. And I'm testing myself and, making sure that I'm going to make that happen. But the indigenous perspective, which is part of what we're going to talk about today, the aspect of light versus darkness, which is happening not only, in third dimensional reality, but in all scopes of, extraterrestrial versus human, cosmic versus, what's happening on the physical plane. The space weapons and space war aspect of this, which is directly connected to chemtrails, HARP, direct energy weapons, all of those things. They've been weaponizing the earth in order for this showdown, which I think we're starting to see more and more evidence of that. The connection to artificial intelligence and these demonic entities, which is also connected to graphene oxide and the technology that's been found in these shots. If you've, watched the Kingdom Within web series, which is in your library, I went into, the layers of the transhuman aspect of this. So I want to get into that and tie all of this in terms of this UFO otherworldly, sort of conversation and the beings of light versus the beings of darkness. So today we're going to talk about two very extreme polarities in terms of this conversation. So I want to start off by reading a passage from Behold a Pale Horse by William Cooper. He's got a whole section within this book that talks about UFOs as well as Area 51. And I want to read this passage for two reasons. First of all, William Cooper is a very highly respected, quote unquote, conspiracy theorist. There is a lot of things written within this book that was written. I think this book was published in the 90s. Don't quote me on that, but if I remember correctly, the early 90s, maybe even earlier than that. But there have been a lot of things that he's talked about in this book that either have come true or are coming true, including Project Bluebeam. But I want to quote on page 427. He's referencing a crash site where a supposed UFO crashed in Russia. And this is a branch of the CIA who put out this report about this supposed crash. Quote, in studying the site, scientist A. Makaved, it's a Russian name, pardon me, reported finding gold, silver, nickel, alpha titanium, molybdenum, hope I'm saying that right, and compounds of beryllium. One of the skeptical physicists from Tomsk had hypothesized that the so-called sphere could have been some kind of plasmoid formed by the interaction of geophysical force fields, which captured the elements found by Mikavek from the atmosphere on its trajectory towards disintegration on the hilltop. Other researchers have generally rejected this explanation since the amounts of various types of metals found at the site would imply, according to this plasmoid theory, that the concentration of metals in the atmosphere should exceed the present level by a factor of 4,000. Now, this is critical for me because all within this writing, I see and hear the technology that HARP and geoengineering and chemtrails was created for, right? So it's not implausible that due to these, interactions with these, spheres or planes, whether it's from a crash site or whether it's from, private top secret information in terms of what the government has or hasn't interacted, right? It's not implausible that they studied, this technology to the best of their ability and created what we see now with geoengineering, HARP, etc. So plasmoid obviously stands out for me, and you're going to hear in Carlos Diaz video later on, he's going to mention the word plasma. I believe he says it in this clip, which, by the way, the full video will be available in your library. But that stood out to me. And then them talking about the conditions within the atmosphere that it would require for a quote unquote plasmoid type field or plane or UFO to have existed in the format that they say it existed. So here we have now a government and world governments that are creating this exact atmosphere and environment in our upper atmosphere. He said that the concentration of metals in the atmosphere should exceed the present level by a factor of 4,000. I think we've exceeded that. Some of the scientists have concluded that the object that crashed into Hill 611 was an extraterrestrial space video constructed by highly intelligent beings. Doctor of Chemical Sciences Vyatsky stated that without a doubt, this is evidence of high technology, and it is not anything of a natural or terrestrial origin. He cited the fact that the elements of fine mesh, including bits of thin threads with a diameter of only 17 microns, and that these threads in turn were composed of even thinner strands twisted into braids. Extremely thin gold wires were discovered intertwined in the finest threads, evidence of an intricate technology beyond the present capabilities of terrestrial science, according to Vyatsky. It goes on to say at the sites of the landings or the crash sites, it's explaining multiple, experiences now later on in the passage. It says that at the sites of the landings, the operating frequency of a crystal controlled oscillator, changes. Simply speaking, electronic timepieces run at rates that are either too fast or too slow, or time speeds up or speeds down according to the watches or phones or anything that's electronic that comes in vicinity with these quote unquote UFOs. So that's just one passage from Bill Cooper, and I'm going to reference this in the forthcoming videos. But I wanted to move forward and talk about the idea of reptilians, right? We're going to talk about the light aspect of this, the supreme beings, the superior beings, and then we're also going to talk about the dark aspect of this. And David Icke has been pivotal and very controversial because of what he talked about, but you'll notice that he's going to have clips of Credo Mutwa, who you'll see in just a second, who basically started on his path of, discovering or researching this quote unquote reptilian race.
Oh, there's a lizard man. Oh, yeah.
A race of creatures which look like reptiles.
There's a lot of people in power that are possessed by these reptilians.
The bit that people tend to struggle with what you've said over the years. So you talk about the banking system, foreign wars, and on all this stuff. People are like, "Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I can go along with that." It's the reptilian stuff. It's the lizard stuff. I can't get my head around.
He's been ridiculed by the media, but he's still convinced that his message can heal the world.
I'm delighted that there's so much laughter in the audience tonight.
I know
But just let me say this.
They're laughing at you. Do you still think the royal family were shape-shifting lizards?
Yes, I do.
You do?
Yes.
Welcome back to the show. Now, would you pay more than $100 to sit for 12 hours and listen to a man who claims the world is run by lizard aliens?
If you deliver it in one line, the world's run by reptiles, you meet it on one level. Oh, that's crazy. Immediate reflex action. When you see all the wars and when you see all the pain and when you see all the suffering, is it a force of love and wisdom and tolerance that is in control of this planet?
One of the most secret stories that was revealed to me is about these beings, highly intelligent beings, which they called the Chitauri, the talkers, a race of creatures which look like reptiles, who have ruled the world for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
a lot of them are malevolent because they represent this manipulative force. But others are benevolent and come into the matrix to pass on information that tries to help us to understand what's going on.
There is an evil group here, the reptilians, that are slowly have been taking people's body over. So it's not like they're attacking us with ray guns or something. I'm hesitant to make this statement, but I'm going to do my best to soften it. But there's a lot of people in power that are possessed by these reptilians. The reptilians are more powerful even than the Sasquatch people. They're very, very evolved, but they're very, very negative.
You can't shift from one physical form to another, the skeptics say. That's impossible. Yes, it is. But there is no physical. That's the point. You can see how keeping people in ignorance of the very reality they're experiencing can be so fundamentally used to dictate their perception. Some people, like the bloodlines of the global cult, as I call it, have twin or hybrid information fields, one human and one not human. Now, to hide their true nature, the human field is the one projected in public, and any observer will decode that field into something holographically human. But when the other non-human field becomes the dominant one, when the information fields shift, the observer is first decoding the human field and then suddenly the non-human field, reptilian or whatever it is. To the observer's decoded holographic reality, someone has shifted from a human form to a non-human form physically, but there's nothing physical about it. The transformation has taken place only in the observer's holographic decoding processes in their head. It is an information shift, not a physical one.
Now, obviously, after the last couple of years, like you say, you've knocked down all these dominoes, and I've heard people say it like, do you know what? I think it could be right about that now. And so to see the story in the mainstream about 2 weeks ago now, where the Princess of Norway, her boyfriend, who I believe is a shaman, has come out and said that he was a reptilian hybrid and that's where they met. And, that's in the mainstream news.
Yeah. I tell you what I found very telling about that article, which was in the mainstream, is they didn't mention me. Because they have used my what I've said about the fact that behind all this is a reptilian race and other non-human races too, but dominated by the reptilian. And that's what's driving this agenda from the hidden. Of course, that to mainstream society is so far out that the ridicule potential is almost limitless. And that's what they did. He's crazy, he's mad. Oh, he's a lizard man. Oh, yeah. And then as more and more starts to come out and more people think, well, hold on a minute, maybe, just maybe, they stopped associating me with that. And the thing is that I would say is, I wrote about the reptilians for the first time in The Biggest Secret, which was 1997, I wrote it. And then another one, Children of the Matrix, which came out in 2001. Well, I can tell them the same forensic research, the same skeptical research that went into pointing out that what is here with us now was coming, went into the whole reptilian thing. I'm not a kamikaze pilot. I only crossed the line to talk about something when the evidence has reached a point that to dismiss it would be ludicrous.
Now, I'm not sharing this position with you of David Icke, who is obviously, sort of sourced the origins of his research through Credo Mutwa. Credo Mutwa was a Zulu Sangoma from South Africa. He was known as an author, excuse me, of books that draw upon African mythology, traditional Zulu folklore, extraterrestrial encounters, and his own personal encounters. Um, Fascinating the things that he has to say in terms of this reptilian race and these sort of demonic beings that were in control and positioning themselves for power throughout eons of time, right? So the other thing that I wanted to say in the upcoming videos, I know I mentioned AI, the demonic entities, graphene oxide, which is connected to the whole black goo conversation. But also all of this is frequency based. Every time, no matter what it is that I'm researching or studying, or it always come back to being frequency based. And so everything that's happening in terms of the cosmological aspect of this, talking about space and extraterrestrial beings and other planets and other galaxies, as well as on the physical plane, the universal laws are applicable, and the universal laws are all frequency based, right? So I think if we can use that as our sort of governing factor moving forward, the same way we use laws, we use American laws to govern us, how to drive, when to drive, where to drive, speed limits, how we engage and interact publicly in terms of, doing business, paying taxes, all of the different, areas of society that we all just kind of like go, to our benefit or not, that are a part of our reality. I think that starting to be conscientious about applying the universal laws as our governing standard is critical right now. And I'm talking about these things, these different extremes, right? Is it fake? Is it real? Is it, supreme beings? Is it reptiles? What is it? Is it grays? Is it aliens with big eyes, right? For us to start expanding our consciousness and what is possible. Because I've said this many times and I'm going to keep saying it, and I'm going to go past 30 minutes, but it's okay, because this Carlos Diaz video is critical and important. We have to watch. I think our clip is like 13 minutes, but starting to expand our awareness on what's possible, because over the last 3 years, all bets are off for me in terms of like, even pursuing things like looking into things like human cloning and, this conversation about the grays and the reptiles. Pre-2020, I knew about those things, but I just wasn't really, interested in pursuing them, so to speak. But now, especially with the research that I've done in terms of what all the shot entails, and just how evil and wicked this agenda has been, which is so far out of my realm of understanding and consciousness, I've also been really trying to seek and understand, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Like, knowing the experience of being a human being, of being a woman, of being a mother, of being a citizen of the world, a lover of the world and of life and of humanity and of nature, is just so unrelatable and unable to, I'm unable to understand the depths of this evil. So I've been trying to understand it. And so from that vantage point, starting to pursue and look into things like this, was the natural next step. And so when we talk about UFOs, we're obviously talking about other entities from other, dimensions of consciousness, or planets, or space and time, all those things. We're going to review that. We're going to look into that and start to discover that. But as we remove the limitations on what we think is possible in our minds, I feel like that's a perfect recipe for miracles to start happening for us. But we have to stay out of the fear-based frequency. And so another reason why I'm talking about this and emphasizing this is because these people are planning on I'm saying planning. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm saying that they are planning, and we have a whole body of evidence now to prove the probability that they're going to, create fake illusions in the sky and a fake alien invasion in order to create a one world government. It sounds so far-fetched. I never in a million years would have thought that they were actually going to do it, but I see all of the things unfolding and I can't ignore the evidence, right? So the illusion only works if you believe it. The illusion only works if you believe it. But if you believe it, it works. So anything that you see in mainstream media, anything you see the media constantly talking about is a part of this agenda. So they're talking about they've shot down unidentified flying objects, but they haven't shown us any footage from their satellite systems. They have footage of them shooting down Russian drones, but they, and people didn't even demand it. There was no outcry. Like, hey, wait a minute, you said you shot down unidentified flying objects. You got 5,000 satellites flying around the earth. Show us proof. Don't just tell us anything. People don't care. So anything that they're talking about in the mainstream media is absolutely pro their agenda. At this day and time, we don't even have time to, they're guilty and proven innocent. They're guilty until proven innocent. The media, the government. And the flip side of all of this, and I'm going to get into that in just a second, reading a passage from the Theology of Time by Elijah Muhammad, as well as showing this final clip of Carlos Diaz and his UFO experience, is that I do believe we have backup. And I don't, I don't think it's a secret that, well, you have Credo Mutwa, who's talking about these reptilians, right? Now, let me stay on point here. I'm going to try not to go past 45 minutes because I want these to be like short, sweet drops of wisdom and things that, stimulate you guys thinking. And then we go to part 2. Remember, I showed this image on the left of the Pope and this reptilian, crazy, demonic looking image, and the explanation that they, gave about the, what this statue means, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. But it's obviously a half human, half lizard-like form, right? So these are, the people who are behind all of the evil, wickedness, savageness for thousands of years in the world, with a very, evil, wicked looking half man, half reptile. Relative, you tell me. The image on the right is in Ancient People in the section on the Moors. This absolutely blew my mind. In the 1400s, after, the Moors finally collapsed, the society finally collapsed, and why did my brain just go dead? The Isabel and Ferdinand came back and basically, reestablished the Christian kingdom. And so the Moors were being expelled from Europe at this point in time. They had a artist propaganda campaign, and they drew these images called "The Moors Submit to the Antichrist." And so on the right, you see the brothers who, dark skin, wearing robes or regalia with I thought somebody was outside arguing. Pardon me. I had to listen. They're very loud though. That's not, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I hope you guys can't hear them. So in the image, the Moors on the right, and then you have this image of this white woman who is supposedly, allegedly, maybe it's Isabel, maybe it's some other, deity, but she's not important. You can see clearly that there are images of what look like a lizard, a flying lizard, and then she's holding the staff that's obviously a Baphomet or a goat's head, right? So I'm looking at these images and it's just like my brain is, and mind you, I'm in Ancient People timeline when I'm working on this, and I'm seeing these images, and they actually created this propaganda in order to basically like seal the deal on us getting these godlike people out of power and bringing in the power of the devil. That's what these images tell me. And you can see the image on the left, the top right image on the left-hand side of the bodies with heads riding the goat or the Baphomet. And those images represent Moloch, the demon. We've talked about him in other episodes of Headline News, but the demon is basically a head. And sometimes it has a body and arms and it eats children, right? That's how it's produced. That's how it's portrayed in iconography and in imagery. And then you also have the image at the bottom, which again, you see this lizard on the right-hand side, right here. And you see these kings, the lizard is here, and then you see these kings bowing again to the Antichrist. So this is propaganda that was released in the 1400s. And we have to assume that the king and the queen who were in power, as well as the, Catholicism at the time, the religion of the time, Christianity, whether secretly or directly, were in cohesion with this imagery put out, because during those days, all of the popular imagery had to be sanctioned by whatever monarchy was in power, right? You just weren't a random, free thinking artist who can just put out anything unless you were going against the grain, and then you would have been popular for that, right? Now juxtapose this image on the left of the Pope and this worshiping this satanic imagery, and then think about the Black Madonna, and understanding that there is a Black Madonna in the hidden, the hidden encased secret compartments of the, these great halls, or these great, places of worship, these great, historical buildings throughout Rome, throughout Washington, D.C. The Pope is actually worshiping, not just the Pope, but men in positions of high power worship the Black Madonna. But in secret, in front of the world, this is who they worship. So again, the lightness and the darkness, looking at this from both vantage points, so to speak. The Pentagon UFO chief says alien mothership in our solar ship is possible. There's a possibility that extraterrestrial motherships and smaller probes may be visiting planets in our solar system, the head of the Pentagon's Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon Research Office noted in a draft report shared Tuesday. An artificial interstellar object could potentially be a parent craft that releases many small probes during its close passage to Earth, an operational construct not too dissimilar from NASA missions, Sean Kirkpatrick, director of the Pentagram's office, et cetera, stated. Now, why is this important? Because I'm getting ready to read a passage from Elijah Muhammad where he's referencing this mother plane, right? There's also video footage of, and I didn't include it because I knew I was going to be short on time, but there's video footage of multiple planes. I should have included it, actually. I could have showed that while I read this. I'll put it in the next video, where you can see like 15 to 20 of these, orbs, light-bearing orbs in the sky, right? So in his book, The Theology of Time, I'm just going to read a couple of passages from this book, because now this is the flip side of these different arguments, and there are many arguments, right? You're going to see a passage in the well, no, you won't see it in the clip we're going to watch in just a second, but you will be able to see it in the full video. I've already uploaded it, actually. The Carlos Diaz UFO experience. It's an hour and 17 minutes. It's in your library in the, I think it's in the unique content section of your library. But on page 107, he says, quote, "In the Bible, you have a prophecy of a will in the book of Ezekiel. This represents Ezekiel's will, which you've read about in the Bible. They actually have it up there. It's up there now, and the devil knows it's up there. This is why he is continuing to go up there and make planes that he can fly so swift that if he could discover it in the skies, he would be able to shoot a rocket at it before they would know. He's making planes to search space with the highest speed known to his scientists. And this will, in a will that Ezekiel prophesies of, goes so high up in the air that it looked dreadful." Now, let me pause for a second. I'm not reading this to get you to, convert to Islam or to believe in Elijah Muhammad. I'm sharing the different explanations from different minds that have been among us that have dared to even talk about these things. Because how many people dare to even talk about these things, right? And I've seen, when I lived in Oakland, I lived I lived in a townhouse that was, sort of perched on a mountainside. And so I had a very open view of the sky. And I was able to, just sit still and watch the sky at times and see what normally would look like a star if you're just looking in the sky, but they would move. And sometimes they would be bigger and sometimes they would be smaller. Now, this is being able to just sit for 30 to 45 minutes and just sky watch, because I am a sky watcher. So I used to do it all the time. So I have seen them at night, right? And so I already had, this um, backdrop of the teachings of the Nation of Islam, which was very, prominent in my understanding. And then also I've, have the backdrop of Bill Cooper and his research and his experiences while being in the naval forces, as well as many other, things that I've studied, right? As well as knowing that we're in one galaxy of hundreds of billions of galaxies. There's no way we're alone, right? And understanding the universal laws and knowing that there's no way, with how sort of weak and fragile and fickle humanity tends to be, that this planet would be left ungoverned. So with all of those things, Eli, this is not because I know Elijah Muhammad is a controversial subject in some, I would expect everybody who listens to me to know that my background and how, this teaching has affected me and how I've, stick to certain aspects of these teachings. And then I've expanded in other ways in terms of my spiritual and metaphysics perspective, which is what you're supposed to do anyway, right? But the things that he talked about in terms of this will, and I've been hearing this for a long, long time, right? A lot of this stuff now is coming true. So he says the will is up in the air now. This is what they are trying to locate from the moon. That is, if they could get to a good stationary place on the moon and watch for this plane. And then he goes on to talk about the capabilities, that it's a mighty military machine and what it's capable of. I'm not going to go into that because it's a little, it's heavy. But this showdown that he's talking about, we have plenty of evidence that these people actually are, talking about space wars. Donald Trump mentioned it during his presidency. Obama mentioned it during his presidency. They have a whole program that is based around protecting Earth from extraterrestrial, unidentified flying objects, etc. They're planning for some sort of showdown. We'll get to that in future episodes. He said this plane carries 1,500 of these small planes. Talking about the mother plane has 1,500 baby planes on it. It's a powerful plane. It can dart in the sky just like what they call flying saucers. He says that there are 4 or 5 scientists on the plane. The plane is a half a mile by a half a mile. He says you will see people that look like us there. He says there is a whole civilization on it. He said that they took him, the FBI came and arrested him and took him. No, not arrested, pardon me. He said, write in the paper if you want and tell the devil what I'm telling you. See if he'll try and deny it. They know it's out there. I sat down and I talked with them years ago about it. They asked me questions. They have the drawing on a blackboard that they've taken from us when they arrested us, and I had drawn the plane and written the explanations on the blackboard, and the FBI took it. They have it there today. Yeah, so that's the and there's a lot more context on that, including some of the drawings. I have some of that stuff is just like, I don't know where I don't know where to look. I don't even know where to look for it. I have stacks of, notes and things that I've pulled from different places that I kept, but, it's tucked away somewhere. But with that being said, you also, the other thing that I wanted to emphasize, you're going to see in this Carlos Diaz piece, the guy, David, I talked about these twin vibrational fields, right? In terms of these reptilians, that they have a human vibration, physical tangible vibrational field, and then they have another vibrational field where they sort of transmute or transform into another vibrational field. So the balance of human and reptilian. And when we talk about parallel realities, you know, this is sort of in that lane as well, right? So keeping in mind, like I said, it's not a question of, do I believe anything? Do I believe Elijah Muhammad? Do I believe Bill Cooper? Do I believe the Pentagon? Do I believe David Icke? It's not a question of what I believe. It's a question of presenting information to you guys that will help you to decide and discern what you believe, right? And once I present the full body of what I want to say here, I'm gonna, you know, obviously tell you what my perspective and my vantage point. That'll be in the sort of finale where I talk about how this applies to the universal laws. Because if these outside, you know, entities, beings, other dimensions of consciousness, you know, grays, reptilians, supreme beings, angels, you know, Palladians, all these different things, right, are existing, we're all still applicable to universal laws, right? And obviously Earth is very important in terms of what's happening on the grand scale. Earth is playing a major role. I believe that. And so that makes me feel good about where I stand, because I know I stand with truth, which means that the vibrational beings that are in alignment with the truth that I represent are going to have my back. And I feel like we have backup. That's how I approach these things, right? So if you magnify that frequency, then that's the reality. If you magnify the frequency of fear and, you know, they're coming to take over, et cetera, then that's when, you know, you're going to attract. And it's not, you know, it would make sense that David Icke and, you know, would be sort of presented with this information in order to expose that aspect. There's a lot of things to be exposed. Like there are many different, you know, people with unique experiences and perspective to sort of talk about all these different layers of what's going on here. So it's important that the dark be exposed, that the wickedness be exposed. If you recall in the Kingdom Within web series, when I played the clip of the gentleman who was a doctor, he was a Polish doctor or scientist. He was a witty character, but he was showing some of the findings, his microscope findings of some of the people who had taken the shot over in his area of the world in Poland. And the imagery was something that looked otherworldly. And I won't get too far into that, but so I'm in looking at all of these different polarities, right? I want to share this. Let me see. I think we're going to end with this Carlos Diaz video. This video is 12 minutes. I'm going to end up at an hour anyway. No matter what I do, I can't get away from 60 minutes. It's all good. But I'm going to play this. It's a 13-minute clip or an 11-minute clip of this experience that this gentleman named Carlos Diaz had. And like I said, I put the full video clip up in your library. You can watch that there. And I will be back with, I'm going to read a short passage after that video, and then we're going to end there. All right. Let me bring the video up. Okay, there we go.
A magazine commissioned me to photograph a sunrise. For this, I chose a place which I knew and loved, a vantage point in the Ayusco National Forest. I parked my car and waited for the dawn, when I recognized an orange-colored light down on the slope in front of me. My first thought was that it was a fire. But in the same moment, I saw a yellow-orange dome rising in front of me, the dome of a large object. It was no fire. It was an unidentified flying object, a UFO. When I realized that I had a UFO in front of me, I grabbed my camera, which I put on the seat next to me. This was a unique opportunity. I was very excited. I wanted to be sure that the picture doesn't blur when I exposed it. So I put the camera on the top of my steering wheel, held it firm in my hands, and pressed the trigger. That's how I banned the object on film. Just when I transported the film, the engine of my car died off. First it was shaking, then the lights went off. In this moment, I shot the second photo with a longer exposure time, and the object was moving upwards. Now I got even more excited, jumped out of the car, leaned on its door to have a support, and shot further photos before the object was shooting off with a high speed.
Estar insistiendo durante aproximadamente 2 meses y medio. Yo creo que iría.
This experience never let me off. Again and again, I drove back to Ayusco 30 or 40 times. One day, about 2.5 months later, the weather was bad. And when I came to the Ayusco area, I entered a fog bank. It was raining heavier and heavier. I turned the windshield wipers on. My headlights cut through the denser and denser fog. And when I came to a crossroads, I entered by mistake the wrong road. It took a while before I realized that I was on the wrong road. And when I was still searching for my vantage point, where I had my first encounter, I recognized an orange glow in the distance. The same glow I saw 2.5 months before. I parked my car when the rain got even stronger, left it, and climbed up the volcanic rock from which the orange glow shone through the fog. I got closer and closer before I reached the back of the hill and saw the object hovering on the other side, across and below me, and just 20 or 30 feet away. I hid myself. I was afraid to get closer, sat there and did not believe my eyes. I could see everything, each detail of the ship, which was hovering there in the mists of the wood.
Por medio de la misma neblina, hacía extenso más su campo de luz.
One of the things I consider most important were my feelings. I had a mixture of emotions. I was very happy and afraid at the same time because I did not know what would happen. What happened was that I got to see the object very closely, and I was surprised, and I wondered because the object was very beautiful. I could see the whole dome. On the surface, it had several cavities. They ranged from very small ones to ones with a diameter of 5 feet, and there were many of them. I was very happy to see all this. I could also see the red spots the ship had, and I could also see that the red areas were brighter than the yellow ones. I did not have my camera with me, so I tried to impress every tiny detail into my mind. It was all very surprising. So I went over the details of the ship for 2 or 3 times, still with a mixture of feelings from fear to happiness. When all of a sudden I felt someone touching my shoulder, and when I felt the touch, I fainted. I knew I got caught. They knew I was observing them, so I was fainting.
Que alguien me tomaba del hombro y en el momento en que me sentí tocado por alguien, me desmayé, ¿sí? El haberme sentido descubierto, ¿sí? Que me tocaron
When I
desde el
recovered, I
Cuando
first
recobré el
saw,
sentido,
and then I could hear,
primero llegó el
and at
sentido de
last
la
I could
vista,
smell.
después
And what I
llegó el
smelled
sentido
was the
del oído
odor
y
of the
después llegó el
woods.
sentido del olfato.
And then I remembered what had
En el
happened.
momento en que
Once I
llegó a mí el
remembered
olor
what had
a
happened, I was
bosque
shocked
húmedo,
because my
inmediatamente
clothes were completely
recordé
dry.
aquello que había visto.
This meant that something
Entonces me
else
tomé
must have
nuevamente
happened
de la
in between.
ropa y me asomé para ver
Completely
si aún
bewildered,
se
I looked
encontraba allí el
around.
objeto, pero
I
estaba
looked down
completamente
again
oscuro.
to see
Ya
the
no se
UFO,
encontraba ningún objeto ahí.
but it was not there anymore.
Entonces lo que hice
It
fue
was completely dark
regresar a mi
already.
auto como pude.
I climbed
Me
down the
acerqué
hill
al
on which I
auto,
was,
afortunadamente
and I
llegué
got
a
to the
él
road and
y
finally to
en
my
el
car.
momento en
It was
que
difficult for me to
arranqué el
find it,
auto y encendí
since there was
las
no path
luces,
down from the
me
slope.
pude dar cuenta que
Eventually, I got
delante
into my
de mí,
car and turned on
aproximadamente
the
a unos
lights
10 metros,
when I
se
realized
encontraba
that there was
un
another car parked in front
auto
of me,
de la marca
about 30 feet away,
Volkswagen,
a
del
red
modelo
Volkswagen
Caribe
Caribe.
de color naranja.
From there,
De ahí
a young
vi
man
salir
came
a un
out,
joven
walked
más o
towards me,
menos de mi misma
and
edad,
when I put my window
unos
down, the
21
guy said,
años,
"Hello, how
salió
are
del
you?"
auto,
I
me
replied,
saludó,
"Hello,
le
I'm
contesté el
fine, thank you."
saludo
And the
y
man said,
se acercó
"If you want
a
to
mi
know
auto.
what you lived
Fui
through this
bajando
evening,
el
I
cristal
will wait for
y
you
en el
tomorrow,
momento en que
for the
llegó a mí
circuit
me
in
dijo,
the
¿qué tal?
USCO
Buenas noches.
provides in two.
Le dije, ¿qué tal? Buenas
Be there
noches.
at noon."
Me dijo, si quieres saber qué fue lo que viviste el día de hoy, te espero en donde se divide el circuito de la Jusco en dos. Ahí te espero mañana a mediodía y te explicaré qué fue lo que viviste la tarde de hoy. Se me hizo eterna, porque yo quería que ella fuera
The
el
night
siguiente
was
día
eternal
ahora sí que
because
a
I wanted
mediodía.
it to be noon already.
Y
I had so many questions and I
en
wanted
cuanto
to
vi
know.
que se acercaban las 12 del
When it
día,
was
tomé mi
close
auto
to
y me
midday,
dirigí
I
hacia el
took
lugar
my
en donde él
car
me había
and I
citado.
drove over to the
Y para mí fue una
place which he
sorpresa que en el
told me.
momento en que llegué, lo
And it was
encontré
a
a
surprise
él
to see him there,
rodeado por
surrounded by about
aproximadamente
20
20
little
niños,
children.
a los cuales para
He
mí fue
was
una
talking
sorpresa
to them,
ver que les estaba hablando a
and
ellos
I was
y de
wondering
qué
what
les
he was
estaba
talking
hablando.
about.
En una mano
In one
tenía
hand,
un
he had a
saltamontes,
cricket.
un
In
grillete,
the
en la
other
otra
hand,
tenía
he had some grass,
vegetación del
some
lugar
vegetation
y
from
les
this
estaba
place.
explicando la interacción que
And he
hay
was
entre todas
talking
las
to the kids
manifestaciones de
about
vida
the
entre
interaction of all
insecto
living
y
things
la
on Earth,
vegetación. Se
and
tenemos
how
que tomar en
wonderful
cuenta
this
que esta
interaction is
interacción
to keep
es
all
lo que ha
life going on.
permitido que este planeta tenga vida y que esta interacción se seguirá llevando durante el tiempo que haya vida sobre este planeta.
After he noticed that I was there,
yo estaba ahí,
he gave the kids 3 balls to play with,
dejó lo que tenía en sus manos
and he started to
y
talk to me.
repartió 3
And he said,
pelotas y
"Look,
dejó
Carlos,
que los niños jugaran.
you will remember
Entonces me
everything
pidió que me
which happened
sentara
yesterday,
junto a él, lo
but it will
hice,
take some
nos
time,
saludamos y
because if you
la
would
verdad
remember
sintió muchísima
everything
confianza.
all of a sudden,
Y me dijo él,
it would be a shock
seguramente
for you.
quiere saber qué fue lo que
But when you
viviste
remember,
ayer. Dice,
you
pero
know where to
esto es
find
algo
me.
que irás recordando poco a poco, porque si lo recordaras todo de momento, sería verdaderamente un shock para ti. Me dijo, y en el momento en que tú hayas recordado todo, sabrás a dónde irme a buscar.
In the following years, Diaz, now living in the valley of Tepoztlan, south of Mexico City, was able to take several more spectacular pictures of these ships of light. But time wasn't right yet to tell the public, and so he kept them for himself without telling anybody.
Que a partir de ese día,
but what he can tell you is that from this day on,
he contado con una maravillosa amistad con estos seres.
He has been having this great friendship with these beings.
Una amistad que para mí merece todo mi respeto.
A friendship that is based on respect.
Y todo mi cariño
and all his love
por lo que me han mostrado
for what they have shown him.
desde nuestro maravilloso hogar,
Well, these are wonderful home,
nuestro planeta Tierra.
our planet, Earth,
Que como ellos me lo han dicho,
as they have told him,
es un verdadero oasis
it's an oasis
en el espacio.
in space.
Now you notice the extreme polarities in terms of the way that these two different experiences play out. The David Icke reptilian perspective, the Greys, right? You know, these evil entities, these evil beings that are, you know, running this planet, trying to run this planet into the ground. And then the experience that Carlos Diaz is talking about, you can feel the love frequency emanating from him. And you saw in the video, and when you watch the full video, you know, how he emphasizes he felt a very strong love frequency in his solar plexus. At any time, it would wake him up in the middle of the night. I don't know if it said it in that passage, but or in that clip, but it would wake him up in the middle of the night, and he knew that the ships were present. And so the other thing he goes into is that these ships were a part, the beings were connected to and a part of the ships. Now, I was looking into these videos by Carlos Diaz maybe 15 years ago, and there were a lot of videos, the full videos of him talking about this experience, right? A lot of those videos aren't available online anymore. I've kind of been combing through trying to find clips here and there. Luckily I have the full documentary, but I remember specifically he talked about the physical, he said that the beings were tall, thin Black men that he was interacting with. Now, in the video, in the documentary that I posted, it doesn't say that in there, as well as some of the other clips that I've seen since I've been looking into this for the past few days. But I remember reading that specifically. And one of the articles that I, read and took some information from actually says that the woman who tapped him on the shoulder, the story he talked about, this being tapped him on the shoulder. Well, in the article, he says that it was a white woman with long blonde hair. And so this is where we get into, it's still that reptilian energy. You know what I mean? Because you're lying. And for what? Why is there so much energy and attention placed on trying to make us the evil ones or the original people the evil ones? And we're getting beyond race to an extent here, because obviously Credo Mutwa talking about these beings, and I referenced Tubshetset talking about the Hyksos god being Baal, and Baal is one of these sort of demonic entities that keeps creeping up in pop culture now, right? So these are wars between light and darkness that have been going on for a long time now. And it didn't start with Europeans, but Europeans, I feel like with the culmination of hundreds or thousands of years of brutal slavery, unlike anything the world had seen, that whole experience for, we'll say 500, 600 years specifically, has fed this demonic, satanic, luciferic, whatever you want to call it, the lower nature, the darkness, however we frame that experience is what was like the catalyst to this extreme evil that's among us now, right? And so looking at Carlos Diaz's experience, the extreme evil will always be confronted by and outshined by extreme love. And so Carlos Diaz was expressing extreme love, and everything that I saw in the documentary, he wasn't trying to make money. This man was poor, by any standard. He just wanted to get this information out and talk about how, these beings were emphasizing how glorious and magnificent this planet was, and how, we need to be taking care of it. But just going back to the concept of twin vibrational fields, right? Remember, David Icke talked about the human versus the reptilian aspect. So we're talking about the lower self, the darker nature of man, humanity, and going into universal laws. The laws of polarity are always at play. So anywhere where light exists, there will be darkness, because that's how we identify the light. So in this article, talking about going into detail about Carlos Diaz's experience, it says, according to his account, he recalled the craft hovered directly over his head as he attempted to touch the craft. Now, this is him remembering. Remember how he said the being, the guy, the man that he was talking to, told him that he will remember slowly. So this is his recollection of as the memory started to come back to him. As he attempted to touch the craft, his hand seemed to pass through the yellow light and he seemed to merge with it. The next thing he recalled was seeing the craft parked on a platform inside a giant cave. Diaz was filled with awe when he remembered what he had seen inside. It was full of stalagmites, some of which were carved into what appeared to be Mayan sculptures, he said. I saw many people in the cave, some of whom waved to me, and in a state of shock, I waved back. Apparently, the being Diaz had encountered in the park then led him to a smaller cave, which contained 7 glowing egg-shaped orbs, one of which Diaz was invited to step into. On entering, Diaz could at first only see yellow light, but then he found himself surrounded by the image of a forest. I could see all the details of the forest as if I was walking through it, said Diaz. I couldn't touch anything, but I could feel the temperature and moisture. I could see and experience everything, yet I wasn't physically there. His guide then told him that the orbs were also a system for storing information and that certain data had been imparted to him. Diaz was then returned to the ship and in time to the park. So contextualize that in terms of that twin vibrational field aspect, being there but not physically being there. And so I would like for us to start pondering and exploring this in our mind, because as we move into this paradigm shift that we're in right now, we're going to have to really elevate our imaginations and our creative minds and our thinking outside the box and our reaching for the stars. I mean, we're talking about galactic wars potentially. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think the technology that this world has, as prominent as they think that it is, it pales in comparison to the power of, the all, so to speak, and nothing is going to interfere with the overall agenda, which is love. We know that. So we have bumps on the road, so to speak, but we're headed in the right direction. But I wanted to talk about this because, in the grand scope of the potential of the stage play that's happening before our eyes, and it is a stage play, let's be clear. The illusion is real if you believe it. So empowering us with information to be able to discern and decipher content, to be able to know what's real, know what's fake. And if you can't figure out, then just leave it. You can't figure out if it's real or fake, then leave it alone, because it's fake by default. Because your inner being is going to recognize God everywhere you go in everything that you do. So seeking truth in this hour, it sort of reigns supreme. So I believe these images, what I saw of the video, and there's more footage of this guy. There's footage of him talking about seeing these men, these Black men who were the beings that he came in contact with, as well as going into detail with, what he saw. And just juxtaposing that with what Elijah Muhammad said. Elijah Muhammad said there is a whole civilization, that it's large enough for a whole civilization where they grow food, and it's self-sufficient. It runs like an entire, city, but not a city. So Quantum Conversations Part 2 will be coming soon. In Part 2, I'm going to I'm going to go into the indigenous perspective and kind of look at what the ancient ones said at different periods of time in terms of, interacting with like the Dogon tribe in Africa, right? And just sort of the interaction with indigenous ancient cultures and these, sort of worldly supreme or superior beings from other galaxies, perhaps, I don't know. But I'd love to get your feedback. Let me know what you guys think about this particular quantum conversation, UFOs, and part 2 will be coming very soon. Thank you so much for your time and attention as always, and I definitely look forward to your feedback. Peace and love.